Today we have a Siteground setup tutorial and a Siteground review. So I'm going to review Siteground, see how well its WordPress hosting stacks up. So basically what I'm going to do here, I'm going to run some performance benchmarks. So I'm going to compare Siteground's performance and measure it up against NameHero and Cloudways. Those are popular competitors in that niche, and see how the performance compares. I think it's pretty difficult to find good objective data these days in this sort of comparison. So without actually signing up by yourself and testing it by yourself. So that's why I decided to do that and share the results with you guys. So I think this is quite interesting. I'll do that first. Then I'll talk a little bit about tech support that you can get on Siteground. I think tech support here is good for beginners and unlimited websites. What does that mean? A lot of places, NameHero and Cloudways, similarly will mention unlimited websites, but there are network limitations that effectively do limit the number of websites you can have. So I'll talk a bit about what that means in practice. I'm going to go through the complete user experience of what it's like signing up and setting up a website WordPress experience on Siteground. So I'm going to go through that in detail and then take you through the conclusions. Now, there will be links in the description for these products. So if you're interested in Siteground or NameHero or Cloudways, there'll be links to discounts in the description. So if you use those, you will be supporting the channel as well. I don't really care which one you go for, if you go for any of them at all. In fact, I just want to share the benchmarks with you guys and make sure you make a good informed choice when you're choosing your web hosting. So let's head over to our WordPress dashboard and check this out. Okay, for our benchmarking, I've used 3 different methods to do the benchmark. So WP Performance Tester by Kevin Ohashi and WordPress Hosting Benchmark Tool by Anton Alexandrov. These are both free in the WordPress repository. You just have to search for plugins under Performance Benchmark. You can actually try these for yourself. The other thing I did was I installed a template website from Cadence. This is a WooCommerce website. So we've got a shop page, and I just built a basic lightweight style blog page here as well that I can test using GTmetrix. Now, the reason I use GTmetrix here rather than something like Google PageSpeed is GTmetrix gives us the option to test with a unthrottled connection. So this is really good for comparing different hosts. So rather than being limited by, say, the mobile speed connection, by setting it to unthrottled, you're actually going to be limited by the server-side connection. And this allows us to compare different servers, say from Siteground versus Cloudways versus NameHero. We can compare them side by side using an unthrottled connection. So let's head over to our results and have a look at how these benchmarks actually compare. So for the first benchmark, we've got WordPress Hosting Benchmark Tool. I've put Siteground up against a couple other comparable products here, NameHero's Turbo Cloud and Cloudways Standard DigitalOcean Droplet. So these are fairly comparable products, and Siteground's actually won this benchmark with an 8.1 compared to NameHero with their 6.4, and Cloudways has a 7 here. So Cloudways DigitalOcean Standard is the cheapest one. If you go up to Vultr High Frequency, you will get a bit more. I think it's closer to a 9 when you use the Vultr High Frequency, but this is probably the most popular one because it's the cheapest. And so this is the comparison here. Notably, the database performance is very good on Siteground, so very good for WordPress, and we're getting a improved benchmarking score there. So let's move on to the next one. The other one we tested with was WP Performance Tester. I had Siteground up against the Cloudways DigitalOcean again. This benchmark didn't actually work on NameHero, so maybe NameHero has some sort of limitation in place that doesn't allow this plugin to work properly. But in this case, we actually had Siteground significantly outperforming DigitalOcean here. So more than twice as quick to complete the WordPress performance benchmark here, and much more queries per second with the Siteground benchmark. So again, Siteground very good in this particular benchmark. And finally, we've got our GTmetrix results. So I did 2 kinds of web pages here. For our blue bar, we've got the WooCommerce shop page. How long does it take to log in and load that shop page on Siteground, NameHero, and Cloudways? Almost identical performance here from Siteground and Cloudways in practice here. So with the WooCommerce page, login and loading in 1.5 seconds, and a light static test page in every case was about half a second on each of these servers. But notably, NameHero's Turbo Cloud was notably slower on that WooCommerce page. So for WooCommerce, definitely Siteground and Cloudways were good choices. Siteground doing really well a fraction slower than Cloudways actually in this test, but really not much difference, just within a couple of percentage points of each other. So what I'm actually talking about here is this template shop page from Cadence Theme and just a test page for that light web page test. So this one loads in about half a second, and these ones were about 1.5 seconds on Siteground and Cloudways. One other important concept is the concept of unlimited sites. So a lot of these will advertise that they don't have a limit on the number of websites that you can host. But in practice, there are some limitations around the number of files or the amount of memory that you can use. So in Siteground's case, the Grow Big plan has an inode limit of 40,000 inodes. That'll give you about 20 typical WordPress sites, assuming about 20,000 files per site. That does vary a lot, but on average, maybe 20. Name Hero will give you about 25 with 500,000 inodes. Cloudways has a RAM limit on the cheapest plan. For example, 1 gigabyte of RAM on the cheapest plan will give you about 10 to 20 typical WordPress sites. You can squeeze more if you use a lot of optimizations. You might get less if you've got like a WooCommerce site. You may only be able to have one decent sized WooCommerce site with 1 gigabyte of RAM, for example. So it does vary a lot, but when you think of unlimited, just keep your expectations in check, depending on which plan you're going for here. There are limitations on server resources, obviously. And finally, I want to touch on support. So Siteground does have a good reputation for support. They offer 3 different kinds of access as well. So you can use ticket support, 24/7 chat support, even phone support. So I know a lot of places don't have phone support. Siteground is one of the rare places that still offer phone support. There's pretty good user feedback about Siteground support. They do have a more hands-on support. A lot of other providers, I think of Cloudways in particular, where if you would like to resolve something, often they will just send you a documentation for you to follow rather than actually going in there and fixing it for you. I think Siteground is a bit more of a hands-on approach, very good for beginners who are trying to work their way through building their first WordPress website, for example. So they're much more likely to fix something for you rather than just point you to the documentation, is the point I'm trying to make here. I think Cloudways in particular is a little bit more technically focused. So if it's probably your first or you're not too experienced with WordPress, I would probably look at Siteground over Cloudways in that scenario. But if you've had a lot of experience and you've done a lot of WordPress, I think Cloudways is a fine choice in that regard. The next thing I want to do in this video is a complete setup tutorial of WordPress on Siteground. So if you use the link in the description, you'll get access to these big 80% off discounts. Now, the startup plan is for one website, Grow Big is for multiple websites, GoGeek is for freelance agencies or small design companies who want to provide web hosting for their clients. So choose the one that's right for you. I think Grow Big or Startup is probably going to be right for most people watching this. I'm going to go with Grow Big myself, but once you've chosen your plan, go through the checkout process and I will skip ahead and meet you in the user panel where we can set up our site. Now that the account is all set up and we are logged in, we can set up a site from this button here, or you can do it through the websites tab here. And you'll have a create website button here or a new website button here. They do the same thing. So the 3 choices we have here are new domain. So this is if you'd like to buy a new domain from Siteground. Existing domain is where you've bought the domain elsewhere. That's what I'd recommend, this one here. Or if you just want to test things out with a temporary domain and then change it later, you can use that one. So let's go with this one here. Now we just have to enter the domain name. I'm using ideaspot.space for this example, and let's go continue. And we are starting a new website and we're going to use WordPress. You can also use WordPress plus WooCommerce if you'd like, but you can just use WordPress. If you decide to add WooCommerce later, it's very easy to add it separately. So that's just fine, leaving it as WordPress only. And we set up our login for WordPress here. So just enter an email address and a strong password in here and go ahead and continue. Now here it looks like they're trying to upsell us to this site scanner, so you don't need to add this. Siteground already run malware scanning services in the background. There's no need to add this. If you'd like some extra security, there are free plugins you can add for WordPress as well. So no need to add this one. Let's just go ahead and click finish. And then just be patient while this all sets up. All right, now we have to point our domain over to Siteground. This is because I'm using my own domain that I bought separately. If you bought your domain through Siteground, you don't have to do this step, but because I put mine over on Namecheap, I have to point the domain over to the name servers NS1 SiteGround.net, NS2 SiteGround.net. So I'll show you how to do that on Namecheap. I've got a video tutorial on how to use Namecheap to buy your own domain. If you're interested in getting set up on Namecheap, this is what I'd recommend to keep your domain separate from all your other services like web hosting and email. It's good to keep these things separate and secure. So IdeaSpot Space is what we're using today. That's under my domain list in Namecheap. And we are going to use custom name server. So under name servers, we're going to use the custom DNS here. And that's where we put in our NS1 SiteGround.net and NS2 SiteGround.net. So just make sure that matches up with what SiteGround has told us to use there. These ones here should match up exactly with what we've got here. Okay, that looks all good. Our name servers are in there. This is not going to work instantly. We need to come back after about half an hour because these names need to propagate across the whole internet. So all these servers around the internet know that this is pointing to our domain, IdeaSpot Space. So let's come back after about half an hour and see how that's going. All right, so after about half an hour, we can head back to our account and we can go to our site tools. SiteGround site tools allow you to manage things on your website like your email accounts, your files, and your WordPress installations. You can also see your address of the server down here, the site IP. I want to actually check just to make sure that our domain name is pointed over to this IP. I'll show you how to do that. I like to use a tool called DNS Checker. You can get that at dnschecker.org. This is totally free to use. Put in your domain name here with the A record there, click search, and you'll see the IP that it's hitting. And just make sure that this address lines up with the SiteGround address here. In this case, it's okay. Again, it does take at least half an hour for this to point over. So just make sure that is working before we go ahead with our next step. Next thing I want to do is go to security and we want to look at the SSL manager. And we can see here that an SSL certificate is already active. So SiteGround automatically sets up your SSL padlock for your website already. Let's check HTTPS enforce. We can turn that on so it's automatically enforced on all the pages you build in the future. So that looks good. Got a success message there. And the next thing we can look at is under speed. We can look at caching. We can see Nginx cache is already on. Dynamic cache is all good. And memcached, we can turn that one on as well. So that looks all good. And then we can head to CDN and we can use the free version here. Go ahead and select that one and go ahead and activate free. And we got our success message there. That looks all good. And now we're pretty much done here. Let's head back to my account and under websites, we can now go to our WordPress admin. And this automatically logs us into our WordPress site here. So SiteGround has a little setup wizard, but I actually prefer to do this myself. So you can use their setup wizard or you can just click exit. All right, so SiteGround have their own custom dashboard. You can actually go back to the WordPress default by going to your plugins and installed plugins here. They have one called SiteGround Central. We can deactivate that. This is just their tutorials and a customized dashboard. But this is the default WordPress dashboard, which I prefer to just use the default. And you can always reactivate it if you're interested in trying it out, but I think the default is better. Now that WordPress is all set up, all you'd need to do to set up a website is appearance and themes. You could install a theme like Cadence theme, Astra theme, Blocksy theme, and use a template, get started like that, or use a migration plugin, add a new plugin like Duplicator or all-in-one migration and use that plugin to bring in an existing WordPress site over to your new SiteGround hosting. So either of those will work good. I'll put links in the description to tutorials where I've covered that before. And the other thing I wanted to cover here was the Siteground Optimizer plugin here. So the Optimizer plugin will give you a few extra steps you can add to help improve the performance of your WordPress website. Now, you don't need to do any of this. This is completely optional, but if you're one of those people who likes to squeeze every little bit of performance out, you can go through these and just turn on the recommendations that they give you for the caching, environment, front end, and media section. Let's go through these one by one here. So caching, you'll notice they have these blue recommended flags here next to all of the ones that you want to turn on. Now, before we go turning things on, it would be considered best practice to make a backup before you start changing the optimizer. So in your site tools, you can go under security and backups and you can just create a backup before you do any of this. And if it breaks anything through the optimizer, you can just roll it back to how it was before. So just keep that in mind. So anything flagged here as recommended, just go ahead, try turning them on. You should get a green success message if that's working okay. Same with this one. And just go through that process. So that covers the caching section. We can move on to the environment section there. So we can turn on the HTTPS enforce and confirm. It'll actually log us out. So we'll have to log back in again for this one. So just log back in. We can see the heartbeat is already turned on. The last one here is the database maintenance. We can actually turn that on. So just turn on probably the first one there. And the other ones here are optional. So it depends on what you'd like. I'd probably delete the things that are marked as trash or spam. The other things here, like I do actually kind of like to keep my revisions. So it's totally up to you which ones you pick here, but at least the top one there, and leave that. And that looks all good. Now we have front end. Now, as we work through these front end changes, it's actually good to check the front end of your website while you're doing this after each change, and just make sure your front end hasn't broken, because these ones can affect the front end. So let's go ahead and just turn these guys on. Generally, on most cases I've seen, this will work just fine. So I'm just going to go ahead and turn them all on, but just keep an eye on your actual front end here. If we reload it, we can probably see it's working okay still, but there may be some sites with custom CSS or custom edits or other plugins that don't always like these optimizations. So just be careful there. But that looks all good. And what else do we have here? We've got media, and currently it's disabled. We can actually edit that. We can change the compression level, say to medium, and go ahead and confirm that one. And this is a pretty cool feature. You can actually generate WebP images as well here. So that will improve the loading speed of your images by using that WebP format. It does take a while if you've got a lot of images already uploaded. So I'll just wait for those 95 images in my case to convert into WebP, but that's a pretty cool feature. Usually only premium plugins give us that ability. So that's really nice that Siteground includes this ability. So in my case, it's actually got through most of these images in less than a couple of minutes. So it depends on what your images are like, how long this will take, but just be patient while that finishes. And we can turn on lazy load there. And I think that's pretty much wraps it up. So if we go back to our dashboard, most of these should be ready to roll. It's only showing 2 out of 6 for front end, so I'll just double check. I see there's also JavaScript here that we can turn on as well as general on that tab as well. So we can turn those on as well, but you get the idea. Again, I wouldn't normally do this so quickly. I would normally go through them one by one, check my front page, make sure everything is working. But I've done this before with this theme, so I know everything is all good, so no need to worry, but be very careful doing this. Make sure you've got that backup like I mentioned earlier. And now back in our dashboard, we can see we've got green for all our recommendations. All right, so in conclusion, I do still recommend Siteground as the best beginner web hosting. Over on my blog at ideaspot.com/hosting, we can see that is my beginner web hosting recommendation there. You've got the discount code in the description or on the blog there. Overall, I like Cloudways. If you've got some experience with WordPress, I do like Vultr High Frequency in particular. They've got that free trial as well if you want to check that one out. And for those of you who are very competent, a little bit more tech savvy, I like going with Vultr High Frequency directly, and you can actually do 30 days for free with that link. I'll put that in the description as well. A full tutorial as well there. So again, I don't really care which one you go for. All of these are excellent. This is probably the easiest, and I have actually seen complete beginners use Siteground and get their websites up and running just fine. And you don't need really any background in web development to be able to use this. I'd recommend this to friends and family who wanted to get started. But for the more tech savvy among us, I know my audience is a little bit more tech savvy, Cloudways or just going directly to Vultr. But that basically wraps it up. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll see you next time.